What if the person who treated your heart like it didn't matter is actually lying awake somewhere still thinking about you? What if that silence you've been staring at isn't peace at all? What if it isn't closure and it definitely isn't strength? What if it's just pressure, quietly building underneath a mask they refuse to take off in front of anyone? Here's something most people never let themselves see clearly. When a person believed they had ownership over your mind, your emotions, and your future, and then you got up and left anyway, that kind of loss doesn't just fade away peacefully. It lingers. It burns underneath the surface. It shows up in the way they wake up in the morning, in the restlessness of their nights, and in every forced smile they perform for the world around them. They might act unbothered. They might look composed, even cold. They might flood social media with pictures that scream happiness and confidence, trying to convince everyone that your chapter in their life is fully closed. But if you start noticing certain behaviors resurfacing again and again, that story is far from finished in their head. Stick with me here because this is going to connect pieces you've probably been trying to make sense of for a long time now. If these patterns keep showing up, it means they are not over you. What they're actually obsessed with is the loss itself, and even more than that, the unbearable truth that they lost control over you. You weren't simply another name in their story. You turned into the mirror they couldn't stand to look into, the truth they tried desperately to bury, and the kind of loss they can't fully wrap their head around, let alone explain to anyone else. Once that truth settles in, something shifts inside you. You stop wasting energy wondering whether they still care, and instead you start understanding exactly why your absence continues to rattle them. The hardest part for them was never really about losing a relationship, it was about losing access to you. It was about losing the kind of influence that let them push and pull at your emotions, confuse you just enough, and still somehow keep you locked in place. You started seeing through the games. You felt every subtle shift in their behavior. You reached a point where the confusion could no longer overpower your clarity. And when you finally walked away, you did something a lot of people struggle their whole lives to do. You chose yourself. That single choice becomes an open wound for someone who only feels secure when they believe they're above everyone else. So even if they never say it out loud, your decision to leave becomes a constant reminder that not every person can be worn down. Not every person can be trained into staying, and not every person will keep begging for scraps of affection. That's exactly why this type of person tends to keep showing signs long after the relationship has technically ended. It isn't because they miss you in some healthy, mature way. It isn't because they suddenly discovered the meaning of real love. It's because your absence revealed the edges of what they're capable of, and their ego simply cannot process that kind of exposure gracefully. Keep paying attention, because once you start recognizing these patterns for what they truly are, you'll stop internalizing them as personal attacks and start seeing them as evidence that your freedom still holds real weight. One thing they do over and over is try to convince themselves that they never actually cared in the first place. This is one of the biggest lies they tell, both to others and to themselves, and the more they repeat it, the more transparent the truth becomes underneath it. They'll say you were nothing important, they'll act like you were just a forgettable phase, a minor chapter, a mistake they brushed off effortlessly. But if that were genuinely true, why do they still react the second your name comes up? Why are they still bringing you up in conversations, quietly checking in on your life, speaking negatively about you to mutual friends, or twisting the narrative to make you look like the problem? People don't burn this much energy on someone who truly means nothing to them. Their words claim one thing, but their actions expose something completely different. Underneath it all, they're furious that you didn't break the way they expected you to. They're bothered that you never came crawling back, begging for another chance. They're deeply unsettled by the fact that someone they thought they had completely figured out managed to find the strength to walk away for good. And because they can't face that reality honestly, they keep repeating the opposite story until it starts to sound convincing, even to themselves. But no matter how many times they insist you didn't matter, their obsession still leaks through the cracks. The bitterness in their comments, the mockery, the strange compulsion to keep proving a point long after the story should have naturally ended. That isn't indifference. That's an injury wearing a mask. Then there's another pattern that tends to unfold quickly. They rush to replace you, sometimes almost immediately. A new relationship appears out of nowhere, or at the very least, it's made to look that way. Suddenly there are new photos, new posts, new public displays of affection, all loud signals meant to say, look how happy I am now, look how fast I moved on, look how little any of this affected me. But slow down for a second and actually look closer. Most of the time, this isn't healing at all. It's a performance. It's panic dressed up to look like progress. They aren't moving towards something deeper or more meaningful. They're moving towards something easier. Easier to control, easier to impress, easier to shape before any cracks in the mask start to show. That new person is often not some genuine upgrade in any real sense. They're simply new, and newness can feel useful when someone is desperately trying to outrun the feeling of loss. But here's the thing that keeps eating at them no matter how hard they try to bury it. No amount of effort erases the comparison running quietly in the background. They still remember that you saw through the act. They still remember that you challenged the story they were trying to sell. They still remember that you grew stronger in the exact moment they expected you to fall apart. So while they're busy constructing this picture of victory for everyone to see, a very different truth keeps chasing them privately. You are healing. You are rebuilding your life piece by piece. You are becoming someone who is harder and harder to shake. And that reality gnaws at them because what you gained through your pain is something they simply cannot fake with curated posts, borrowed attention, or another rushed connection. After that comes the checking, the quiet watching, the constant search for some kind of proof that you're not doing okay without them. Even if you've blocked them across every platform, they'll often find sneaky ways to keep tabs on you anyway. A fake account here, a mutual friend there, a random appearance that feels just a little too convenient to be accidental. Some people might call it simple curiosity, but more often than not, it runs much deeper than that. They want updates because they want confirmation that you're still hurting, still confused, still emotionally tangled up in what happened between you. In their mind, your pain would validate their sense of importance. Your struggle would hand them back a feeling of power they lost the day you walked out. But when they see you smiling again, growing steadily, building a calmer and more peaceful life, or simply existing without their shadow hanging over you, something inside them quietly collapses. Because the story playing in their head was supposed to go differently. You were supposed to stay broken. You were supposed to keep carrying the sound of their voice inside your head. You were supposed to prove that losing them left permanent damage. When none of that happens, their fragile pride takes another direct hit. This is exactly why living well matters so much in all of this. Not as some loud, dramatic act of revenge, but simply as proof. Proof that whatever they tried to damage inside you was never your entire identity to begin with. Proof that their control had clear limits. Proof that your life can continue to expand and open up even after they tried their best to shut every door they could reach. Stay with me until the end because this next pattern explains a lot about why they work so hard to rewrite the story surrounding your relationship. They almost always rewrite history. They rarely sit with the honest truth and admit, I lied, I manipulated, I pushed too far, and now I'm dealing with the consequences of that. Instead, they flip the entire script around. Suddenly, you were the unstable one. You were impossible to deal with. You were too emotional, too difficult, too cold, too demanding, too distant, too much, or somehow never quite enough. The specific details might shift depending on who they're talking to, but the underlying goal always stays the same. They're trying to protect the image they've carefully built, both in front of other people and within their own mind. If they were to admit the real reason you left, they would have to confront something incredibly painful. They were not actually in control. They were seen clearly, completely, and without the filter they relied on. That kind of exposure feels unbearable to someone whose entire sense of self depends on maintaining appearances. So they twist the facts around, strip away important context, and tell a version of events where they're the wounded party and you're somehow the source of all the damage. What's strange is that after repeating this story enough times, they can genuinely start to believe their own revised version of events. But believing a lie doesn't transform it into truth. It only reveals how desperately they need that lie to survive. And the more aggressively they work to tarnish your name, the more it actually reveals their fear underneath it all. Because deep down, they know exactly what happened. They know precisely how far they push things. They know that if the full truth ever stood in plain daylight, their mask would shatter completely. So every attempt to smear your name doubles as a quiet confession. It's really saying, I am still threatened by the person who found the courage to walk away from me. After all of that, many of them attempt something that looks small on the surface, but carries a heavier weight underneath. A random message out of nowhere. A strange, unexpected call. A casual comment that seems completely harmless at first glance. Maybe they mention seeing something that reminded them of you. Maybe they send a cold little check-in months after everything ended. Maybe they claim they texted you by accident. Maybe they drop something vague designed to stir up old emotions you thought you'd buried. Don't miss what's really happening here. This is rarely about genuine care or reflection. It's a test. They want to find out whether the door is still even slightly unlocked. They want to know if their name still has the power to move something in your heart, disturb your hard-earned peace, or pull you right back into the same old cycle. They aren't reaching out because they've finally understood the pain they caused you. They're reaching out because uncertainty bothers them deeply. Silence unsettles them. Losing access to your emotional world bothers them more than they'll ever admit. If you respond, they collect information. They measure exactly how available you still are to them. They gauge whether they can still stir up confusion in your life. They assess whether your healing is genuinely stable or still fragile underneath the surface. That's why these small moments carry so much more weight than they seem to on the outside. A harmless-looking message can function as a hook, A soft, gentle tone can conceal a familiar trap you've fallen into before. And if you've ever felt guilty for choosing not to respond, remember this clearly. Peace can sometimes look exactly like refusing to answer something that was specifically designed to reopen an old wound. Real care creates clarity. Control creates mixed signals and confusion. Learn to tell the difference, and your entire life begins to change for the better. There's another side to all of this that people don't always talk about openly, and it tends to surface once the performance starts to wear thin. They begin to self-destruct in ways that aren't always obvious at first glance. Maybe it starts small, but the cracks gradually spread wider. Poor decisions pile up, new relationships fall apart, sudden bursts of anger appear out of nowhere, careless choices multiply, jobs get lost, friendships crumble, more chaos enters their life, more blame gets thrown around, more noise fills the space where stability used to be. Why does this happen? Because once they no longer have you around to absorb their pressure, reflect back the image they desperately want to see, or carry the emotional weight of their own inner emptiness, they're left sitting alone with themselves. And that is often the exact place they fear the most. Your leaving was never just a simple breakup inside their mind. It was a direct injury to the part of them that needed to feel dominant, needed to feel chosen above everyone else, and needed to feel more powerful than the person standing right beside them. Without that emotional supply, they can start spiraling downward. They compare themselves constantly. They compete over things that don't even matter. They try desperately to outrun the wound they're carrying, but the wound simply keeps pace with them wherever they go. And when they glance over and notice that you're gradually becoming lighter, clearer, and stronger with each passing day, the contrast becomes almost unbearable for them because they don't have a stable enough sense of self to stand on their own 2 feet. They need to feel ahead of someone else just to feel any sense of value. They need to feel superior just to feel remotely safe. So when the very person they tried to diminish starts to rise up on their own terms, they don't just feel envy. They feel something closer to collapse. That's precisely why your steady, quiet healing can trigger their deepest insecurities without you ever having to say a single word to them. What keeps this obsession alive for even longer is a fairly simple fact. They don't forget the people who managed to escape their pattern, not because they loved deeply or healthily, but because you became living proof that their methods don't actually work on everyone. Forever, you saw straight through the charm. You noticed the constant back and forth between praise and punishment. You recognized the confusion for exactly what it was, and despite everything, you still chose to leave. That matters far more than they will ever openly admit to you or to themselves. They might meet plenty of new people after you're gone. They might act interested, devoted, even completely transformed for a while. But somewhere quietly in the background, the comparisons never fully stop happening. Why did you become so much harder to control than everyone else? Why did you refuse to keep accepting the same exhausting cycle? Why did you choose distance instead of chasing down some kind of closure from them directly? Those questions linger with them because your decision forced them to confront a limit they never wanted to face in the first place. You became the lesson they didn't want to learn, the mirror they never asked to look into, the unfinished business they can never fully silence no matter how hard they try. This is also why you can sometimes still feel their energy long after you've established no contact. It isn't magic, and it certainly isn't some kind of destiny playing out. More often than not, it's simply the reality of someone who lost control, still struggling to understand exactly how it slipped through their fingers. If everything so far is starting to make sense, stay with me a little longer, because the next part matters even more for your healing than it does for understanding their story. So what should you actually do with all of this new understanding? First and most importantly, don't romanticize any of it. Someone being obsessed over losing you is not the same thing as someone loving you well. Someone thinking about you constantly does not automatically mean they're safe to be around. Someone quietly watching your life unfold from a distance doesn't mean they've genuinely changed for the better. A person can miss having access to you and still not miss the pain they caused you. They can crave your attention and still not value your actual peace of mind. That's exactly why your healing can never be built around whether or not they're still thinking about you. Your healing has to be built on what you now understand clearly. You know the pattern inside and out. You know the real cost it demanded from you. You know just how much of yourself you had to sacrifice simply to survive inside that cycle for as long as you did. So, the next time your mind starts asking, do they still miss me? Try asking yourself a better question instead. If they came back exactly as they are, unchanged, would your life become calmer or more chaotic? Would you feel safer or more anxious? Would you actually feel loved, or would you just be pulled straight back into confusion? That question tends to bring the truth into focus much faster than anything else. And here's the honest truth behind it all. Many people return to these situations because obsession often looks intense, and intensity can be mistaken for importance. But intensity built on control, fear, guilt, and emotional hunger is never the same thing as real love. Protecting your own peace isn't cruelty toward them. It's wisdom you earned the hard way through real experience. There's something else worth understanding too. Often what they're really chasing is one final victory. Not necessarily your heart forever, and not always a complete reunion. Sometimes all they actually want is proof that they can still get inside your mind whenever they choose to try. Proof that a single message can still shake you to your core. Proof that one rumor can still unsettle your peace. Proof that one sudden, unexpected appearance can make your nervous system remember that old, familiar fear all over again. That's exactly why your boundaries matter so much, even in moments when maintaining no contact feels unfair, cold, or entirely too final for comfort. A boundary isn't a form of punishment directed at them. It's simply a line that clearly says, whatever harmed me before does not get easy access to me now. And yes, there will absolutely be moments where you feel lonely, curious, or even tempted to quietly check up on what they're doing these days. That doesn't make you weak in any way. It simply means the bond you shared genuinely affected you on a deep level. But every single time you choose not to feed back into that old cycle, you strengthen something inside yourself that they secretly hoped would stay broken forever. Every day that passes where you don't feel the need to explain yourself, defend your choices, chase after them, or reopen that old wound, you're actively building a completely different kind of life. A quieter one, a clearer one. A life where your sense of value is no longer decided by someone else's approval or their rejection of you. And that new life you're building is exactly what they struggle to fully understand, because it proves beyond any doubt that your power was never actually sitting in their hands to begin with. There's also a hidden layer of grief tangled up in all of this that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Sometimes the hardest part of the entire process is accepting that the person you once loved may never actually tell you the full truth about what happened between you. They may never own up to the damage they caused. They may never offer you the apology your heart was quietly hoping for. They may never admit, even privately, that they still think about you, still compare other people to you, or still feel shaken by the fact that you managed to move on without them. But closure doesn't always have to arrive through their honesty or their willingness to admit fault. Sometimes closure comes entirely through your own clarity instead, through finally seeing the full pattern laid out clearly. Through recognizing that what once left you so confused now makes complete sense in hindsight. Through realizing that their reactions after everything ended were never really signs of deep personal change, but signs of deep personal injury instead. And once that particular truth clicks fully into place, you stop waiting around for that perfect final conversation that was never actually going to happen. You stop standing at the door of a house that never truly felt safe to begin with. You stop searching for warmth in the exact same place that originally taught you so much pain. That's the moment when real freedom finally begins to take root. Not when they finally understand you the way you always wanted them to, but when you no longer need them to understand you at all. Not when they finally confess everything they lost the day you walked away, but when you completely stop measuring your own worth by whatever they failed to value in the first place. That shift feels quiet when it happens, almost understated, but it is genuinely powerful. It changes absolutely everything about how you move through the rest of your life. So if you've been sitting there wondering whether their strange, inconsistent behavior means they're still secretly stuck on you, the honest answer might very well be yes. But let that particular truth serve your healing process, not feed your lingering hope for a reunion. Let it remind you clearly that walking away actually mattered, more than you might have realized at the time. Let it show you that your absence carried real, undeniable weight in their world. Let it confirm for you that what they lost wasn't easy to simply replace, wasn't easy to erase from memory, and wasn't easy for them to forget no matter how hard they tried. But please don't ever mistake their obsession for genuine transformation. Don't mistake their continued focus on you for real devotion. Don't mistake any attempt they make to return for actual repair of what was broken. The single most powerful thing you can do right now is simply keep going forward. Keep healing at your own pace. Keep choosing the people, the habits, and the spaces around you that make your body and mind feel safe again. Keep building a life that doesn't require chaos or drama just to feel meaningful or intense. And if they're still out there thinking about you, still quietly checking in on your life, still comparing everyone new to you, still replaying the exact moment you finally walked away for good, let them sit with all of that on their own. You don't have to carry any of that weight for them anymore. Your job was never to help them feel better about the reality of losing you. Your only job now is making absolutely sure that you never lose yourself again in the process. And honestly, that's the part they never saw coming. Not your pain, not your tears, and not even your silence. It was always going to be your strength, your clarity, and your firm refusal to ever return to what originally broke you down. That is the part of you that stays with them long after everything else has faded. And that is exactly why, in the quiet corners of their mind, they will never fully manage to forget you.